Good evening and welcome to Bhakti Brain Health Clinic's August 2024 Functional Forum. We're going to be talking about neurotherapy for peak performance tonight. We're glad you've all joined us. I'm happy to see you, happy to see all of you who are online as well. I'm going to just give you a brief overview of our clinic before we get into our presentation. This is our group, our team members for Bhakti Brain Health Clinic. As you can see here, we have an awesome group of individuals that make up both our technician and admin staff, as well as some marketing folks. We are always grateful to have them around. Bhakti Brain Health Clinic considers itself a center for excellence. We believe that there are some particular things that distinguish us from other clinics who are doing neurotherapy. The things that we believe distinguish us are the tools that we use, the training we do, and the time that we commit. We have spent a lot of time developing the equipment, bringing on the equipment that we use. We have committed to using state-of-the-art technology. We have the most advanced cutting-edge technologies available that we use both in clinic and as at-home devices as well for our client populations. We do both assessment and training in our clinic. That makes us unique as well. Our assessment is pretty comprehensive. We do the standard quantitative EEG, which is the brain mapping, but we also do an event-related potential along with the brain mapping. That allows us to get information about the functioning of your brain and the neuronal functioning that is happening. We also do HRV, heart rate variability, biofeedback. So we bring biofeedback into the training that we do with clients, again, both in clinic and at home. And then our assessment also includes some neurocognitive assessments. We do mental health diagnostic assessments, and then we also include genetic testing as one of our assessments. And so we're really kind of looking at covering kind of all of the bases. We're looking at the function of the brain, the cognitive processing for the individual, and then also looking at the nutritional assessment as well. We provide a variety of trainings in clinic, and then we also have some devices that we use that clients can use at home. Our in-clinic trainings include a variety of neurotherapies like neurofeedback, neurostimulation, photobiomodulation, which is red and infrared light therapy, and then audiovisual entrainment as well. And then we also have some supplements that we will provide clients with when appropriate. The training that we do, so we take a really integrative approach to our training, and so we do have a brick and mortar clinic. So we have many of our clients who come into the clinic to do training, but we also provide a lot of training like in schools. We have schools who are utilizing devices that we have, and we work with them to allow their students to be able to stay in class more than having to be taken out or maybe even going home. We work with other organizations as well to provide a variety of neurotherapies at home. And then we spend a lot of time, we have committed to spending a lot of time on continuing our education. This field is burgeoning. It's something new is happening every couple of minutes, it seems like, in terms of the research in this field. And so we just spend a lot of time immersing ourselves in kind of the forefront of the research. So that we can identify cutting-edge interventions that we can then bring into our client populations to provide as high quality of a service as we can to them. And then we spend a lot of time providing direct service to our clients. So this is when they come into training, but we also spend a lot of time interacting with them when they aren't in training as a way of really kind of supporting them. We make sure our clinic is open. We're not open the standard 8 to 4. We're open, later into the evening. We're open on weekends, that sort of thing. And so these are the things that really distinguish us as a brain health clinic. This is just a list that you see on the screen of the many professionals who have influenced us along the way. These are people who are kind of forefront in the field of neurotherapies, and we have used them. Some of them have been our trainers and mentors. Some of them we simply follow what they are doing, the research that they are doing, the legacy of research that they've left, and we feel kind of eternally grateful to them for continuing to teach us how to be the professionals that can provide the kind of service that we are wanting to do for our clients. I think Guy's gonna take some time to talk with you a little bit about the presentation. So we're talking about peak performance this evening, and we're going to start out by kind of giving you sort of a bigger overview of the idea of brain health, and from there then we'll start to talk about some specific ways of going about doing peak performance with particular populations.
We'll take a look at an example of one of our measures for looking at a network function. So the graphic you see on the top is kind of an overall measure of how is this particular brain doing. So it's a scale of 0 to 10 between, or 10 to 0, good to poor. And so we can see that this person's not doing great. But then it breaks down into the 12 kind of most common networks underneath, and gives us a little bit of a state of how are those individual networks doing. So this is a little bit what he's pointing at, is we can look at the individual networks, but then how are those networks talking to each other, and kind of this measure of modularity and connectivity. And that is a way to look at the brain in terms of how is it doing its overall job of running and managing the whole system and not one particular function. When Fran is back up here, I think she'll have some slides that do get down into the particulars. And we certainly work where we'll dial down to a very small region of the brain to see what's going on there. But it's always in this context of how is the whole system doing, how are the networks doing, and a lot of our training is based on network training. So, again, from our perspective, I like to say all neurofeedback is peak performance, right? We don't really think of ourselves as treating a condition, like we're not treating depression, we're not treating anxiety, we're not treating a traumatic brain injury. Sure enough, we see people who have all of those, but in our minds, when we're looking at the brain, when we're at the level of neural activity and network activity, we're really thinking about regulation and dysregulation. Where is the brain doing fine, humming along, and where isn't that happening? And then our job is to come in and get the areas that aren't communicating or under communicating back communicating again. So we like to say we regulate dysregulation. That's what we do. And when we can restore that core functionality to the brain, what happens, the outcome of that is health. And again, so we might say we don't treat anxiety, but if we regulate the dysregulation, the symptoms the person recognizes of their anxiety kind of melt away. And that's more the approach. You heard the last gentleman talking about how in neurology they really think pathology as opposed to health. And of course, we all know that all of medicine is really set up that way, is it's a disease care system versus a healthcare system. But we are seeing very much a movement towards actual health promotion. And this idea of peak performance fits right in with that model, that it serves all of us if what we're focused on is how can we do better as opposed to how can we do less poorly. Right? Like I like to say, it's more fun to manage wealth than it is to manage debt. Right? And that's the way we think of it in the brain clinic. So although we do spend a lot of time talking with people about their symptoms and their conditions, we try and remind everybody that what we're really doing is we're optimizing function, we're restoring function, and that leads to better health. So I want to circle back one slide here. And so this is, I put the information of this talk in this slide. I'd thought about sharing a clip like I did with those other clips, but what this guy has to share is so in depth it's so nuanced. There just wasn't a clip that did it justice. So I pulled out kind of one of the primary pictures here. So what we're looking at is kind of a cartoon of our chromosomes and different sites, different genetic sites along a chromosome. And we kind of think of the yellow ones as kind of the genes they're supposed to be turning on and off to help manage our day-to-day health and well-being. Those are the yellow ones are just kind of that happening as it's supposed to be happening. The pink ones are, so on the top row is kind of genes that we would rather not have expressing, so maybe mutations. And then the bottom two rows are really what he kind of characterizes as the junk DNA, the DNA that we don't really see as being all that active, in a human being. So we've got all this DNA that is kind of quiescent. It's called junk DNA. And then our DNA that we think of as operating, and then there's it operating healthy, and then into what they call methylation, where you're getting activity at the genetic level that is suboptimal. So this is the cartoon, and basically what he's saying is, so the little piston on the side is again a cartoon for the work of life, like what it takes to stay alive, be alive, and that activity of just continually the biological process, our physiology, and turning genes on and off, tapping genes to make enzymes to do whatever their job is in the moment that they're being tapped to do, and his whole kind of story, and this is, he's got fantastic research. It's one of the things I wanted to include him, and I'm passionate about it, and I wanted to include the whole talk rather than 4 minutes of it, but I'll let you guys go watch it on your own. But his research is really about longevity and why do we age and die versus living endlessly? Like, what is that process? Why is that process the way it is in human beings? And basically, what his research is showing is that as our system starts to break down and the fidelity of our moment-to-moment regulation begins to break down, that starts a cycle that we call aging. So as we get older, we'll have more methylation pathways. We'll have more genes doing things we don't want them to. And as that continues, that will eventually trigger genes that are in that junk DNA to start turning on and becoming active. And then we have really unwanted things to have happen to us. So again, what his research is showing is if we could calibrate so that our system stayed optimally regulated, we could manage this process that we call aging. So basically, what he's reframing aging as is essentially dysregulation stretched over 80, 90, 100 years. But it's that process as the system slowly loses the plot and gets wobblier, that wobbliness drives more wobbling, and eventually that is death, whether that's natural causes or a disease. Either way, that's the process. The body's ability loses its ability of resilience to repair the damage, and eventually we get too far behind. So where this fits into our talk tonight is thinking of the brain as the master organ that has its fingers and everything, and it's in the process of regulating. The better functioning our brain is, the better it is able to keep our system well regulated and within a really tight set point in our physiology. And that's what we mean by peak performance, right? Is the entire psychophysical being optimized over a life course. And we see a primary role for the brain in that process.
Okay. So I'm going to spend some time just starting to talk about like what we might do to enhance peak performance with an individual, with a client that comes into our clinic. So we're really looking at that idea of unlocking somebody's full potential, right? And so I have this slide here because I think when we think about peak performance, we oftentimes think about the elite athlete, and they're the one that's working on peak performance, the elite musician, the artist, the high-level corporate executive. And certainly those people are definitely oftentimes interested in peak performance, enhancing their performance, working toward their full potential. But you'll notice on the screen over here in the bottom left that we just have a group of people playing pickleball, right? And this kind of goes to what Guy was talking about. That idea of peak performance really is about just enhancing people's potential. And so you don't have to be kind of in that elite field to actually work on peak performance for your system. Most of the time when people come for peak performance training, they have a particular place where they're really wanting to kind of move to, like they've got some sort of desired outcome. And typically it's in one of these three areas. Oftentimes this is somebody who's, kind of reached up a particular level in their field, whether again it's an athlete, a corporate exec, a teacher, that sort of thing. And they're wanting to make some kind of breakthrough to move to the next level. And so that's what their goal is in terms of reaching more potential. Then we have a group of people who have gotten kind of where they wanted to be, at least that's where they're at this point in time, but they lack some consistency, so maybe they've got a hit and miss performance kind of record. Oftentimes these are folks who struggle with environmental factors influencing their performance. So this might be the corporate exec who, when it comes time to making decisions, the anxiety that they have gets in the way of them making decisions, or the pressure that they feel from the people that they are working with or perhaps working for becomes pretty intense and starts to impair their ability to stay consistent in their performance. And then the third group are people who are really at the top of their game, but are wanting to make sure that they maintain their excellence. And so they refer to this in the field of peak performance as the next man up pressure. So that idea that I'm at the top of my game, but if I look over my shoulder, there's somebody right behind me waiting to step into my shoes, right? So I gotta make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. So we think about it in terms of those elite people, but you could also apply this to the parent who is busy trying to do parenting and maybe work outside the home, that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of different ways that we could apply this model about desired outcomes in peak performance. Most of the time when people come to us for peak performance, what we really need to do is find out what is your pain point, like where is it that you are getting stuck. And we are going to then apply techniques that will impact the person's psychological and physiological factors, those things that might be negatively impacting their performance. And to do that, we're going to do things like improving their capability, their capacity, their productivity, their performance, and we're going to help them to understand and manage their impulse controls. It's a big one that we oftentimes see in the population we work with, to be able to kind of intensify their focus and at the same time perform at the same high level. To manage stress, notice that we're saying manage stress, not necessarily reduce it, because oftentimes whatever it is that we're doing in our life, it's full of stress, right? And it's hard to get away from it. And so what we want to do is teach people how to manage that so that it doesn't impair their performance. And then we also like to talk and help people improve their recovery. And so this goes a lot along the lines of sort of the psychophysiological piece of things, improving sleep quality, regulating metabolism, those sorts of things. I put a slide in here about what, some of the people that we've trained that are, I would consider were here for kind of some peak performance ideas or goals. This is some of the quotes that we've got from them. And so I won't read through all of them, but maybe just to highlight a few things. A leadership coach who works a lot with corporate groups in the metro area. She notes that her results, she notices a particular increase in ability to stay focused, less anxiety in challenging situations, more cognitive flexibility. It's a huge one. The folks that I've worked with who are working on peak performance kinds of things, and mostly they have been in the corporate sector, that idea of cognitive flexibility has been one that many of them have identified as something they want to do. And then better sleep, which is what we hear kind of across the board. No question, neurotherapy helped break the ruts in my thinking. Again, that's that cognitive flexibility, improved focus, better focus with golf game, and don't get so easily frustrated. This is that idea of being able to kind of manage the stress and stay in a state of focus while stress is present. Increase in cognitive stamina. They don't get as easily irritated with other people. This is a corporate executive. It's another thing that happens a lot with corporate executives is they come in because they are really kind of losing it with the people that they work with because they feel a lot of stress and they get and they're having a hard time managing it. And then the last quote there is from a musician who kind of talks about that idea of kind of, being a little uncomfortable with the idea of changing their brain through neurotherapy, only to find out that that was a pretty big misconception on their part, and the opposite thing has happened. They're creating more again, collaborating with others in meaningful, productive ways. And so this just kind of gives you a sense of what we do in the clinic that can help people to enhance their performance. The field of peak performance talks about this idea of a mental performance model. And it really is looking at these three areas. The idea of how you feel, and so really looking at people, working with them, and this is more of the psychology piece of things. We do a little bit of this with our clients. Certainly you can't work with them without doing some of this, but this is not our primary area of focus. But that idea of helping them to create mental imagery, those kinds of things. And then how do you think? How do you think about what you do? Where do you spend your attention? How's your memory? Your perceptions? What strategies are you using that are either enhancing your performance or not working very well? And then the third thing is how your brain functions. So this is the neuronal component, and this is where we at the Brain Health Clinic really focus our attention. And so we're going to work with people to help them develop strategies to reduce impulse control issues, to develop focus endurance, focus capacity, stress regulation, stress capacity. What we're really doing with peak performance, it's sort of a little bit different than what we do if we're looking at this from a clinical population. So a little bit earlier, Guy was talking about the idea of symptoms and working with people with symptoms as opposed, and focusing on symptoms as opposed to sort of looking more at this as in terms of like creating more enhanced performance. And this is really what peak performance is about, is that idea of kind of helping people to be able to get their brain into a state that allows them to perform at the level that they want to perform. And so it's like state versus trait. So trait is kind of like a characteristic that is present and a bit unchanging, or can be, it's been present. State is momentary, right? So this is the athlete who has to gets thrown into a pitching inning and has to perform in that moment. And in that moment, that athlete's state may include anxiety, may include some kind of like disconnecting that happens, like almost a dissociative experience that happens as they are up there. And so that's really what we're looking at doing, is helping them, like through the process of neurotherapy, to get the brain to be able to go in and out of these states a little bit more easily. So we're looking at the idea of creating some brain states, creating volitional control. So I think about, I work with in my therapy practice, I work with a client who had previously done some neurotherapy with Guy. And this client now, as we work through issues in their life, is able to actually put themselves into particular brain states because they learned how to do that while they were doing their neurotherapy with Guy. And it's been extremely beneficial for them in terms of their healing from trauma. And so this isn't somebody that's necessarily looking, didn't come in looking for peak performance. In fact, it was the opposite, came in with a lot of symptoms, right? And as a result of their neurotherapy, they are at a place where they literally can kind of get themselves into particular preferred brain states when they make a choice to do that. We're also going to look at the idea of how do we create intensity for somebody who's doing peak performance in a way that helps them develop some skill while they're in that brain state of being able to kind of stay there when things get intense. And then maintaining self-regulation abilities. And so I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit more in depth here. So when we're talking about enhancing a brain state, we're really looking at as we're doing neurotherapy, and we might be training a network, like we might be training the default mode network with that individual. And so we're doing neurofeedback with them. But our conversation might be around during a break between rounds. What does it feel like? Tell me what it feels like right now. What do you notice about your state? What does it feel like to be in that state? How does it feel in your physical body? How does it feel in your brain? So that idea of starting to kind of train the system to be able to kind of identify and be with a particular state. And then developing and enhancing an ability to move in between particular brain states. So creating the state and then being able to let that go and come back into it. And so there are ways that we can work with clients to make that happen. And then this idea of volitional control of a brain state. So this is really about helping the client learn how to get into a particular state at the right time, right state at the right time, that sort of thing, and then be able to turn it off, right? So again, if I'm a corporate exec and I need to give a big presentation, that I'm able to kind of pull myself into a state that may actually have some kind of like heightened excitability to it, right? So that it energizes me a bit, and so that my cognition is getting fired up, and then but not too much of that, right? So that starts to cause some anxiety in me. But then maybe to be able to kind of let that go, turn that down a bit when I'm done with my presentation, and be able to start feeling that sense of being able to kind of regulate the system, their own system in that way. And then we talk a lot with people about the idea of recovery. We do this like even in a session itself. We might talk about recovery. One of our techs, when I listen to him talking with people, he's constantly reminding them to hydrate when they are done training. And to me, that is a piece about recovery, right? It's about that idea of doing that. But we also talk a lot about sleep. And so many of our clients, we will have them use maybe an audiovisual entrainment device at home because they'll use it for sleep protocols, because what we know is during sleep is a time when our brain gets to repair, gets to learn, gets to process, and that can kind of promote a creative process to happen. And then oftentimes with training, we will provide some kind of intensity. So this is just sort of creating some sort of stress test. So we might do this when we're doing biofeedback with somebody, but we can also do it when we're doing neurofeedback as well, where we're getting somebody into a stressed state and then training them to manage it. And so we might do something with neurofeedback where we have the individual start to think about something that causes stress for them. Maybe it's a work-related thing. Maybe it's the skill that they've been trying to learn as an athlete, or the piano piece that a musician is trying to learn, and the section that's been particularly difficult for them. And we might have them think about that while they're doing some training, and allow them to see what happens when they're training and thinking about a stressful incident, and then working with them to manage the stress. So I'm just going to play this video quickly. I won't play the whole thing, but this is an example of what we might do with somebody. So if we had a basketball player that was really wanting to up their game in free throws, this might be something we could do. We might hook them up to some biofeedback and have them watch a video such as this. So I don't know about you, but I get stressed out watching this. I feel bad for the player because I can imagine what it must be like to be trying to do what it is that you have been training to do and not being successful. That's hard enough, but then having a crowd that is booing you. But to have somebody watch this video and be able to work on managing like their autonomic nervous system through biofeedback, that's the kind of process that we can do to help people to again enhance their performance. The more you can manage stress in the moment, the better opportunity you have to engage in your full potential. And then we talk about the idea of maintaining self-regulation abilities. So I love this idea, this quote about getting your butterflies in formation. I heard somebody say that when they were talking about the idea of managing anxiety. And this is really that idea of like, look, anxiety happens, right? It's going to happen. And so you just need those butterflies that are in your stomach that create all that nervousness, you just need to work with them to get them in formation rather than to try and get rid of them, right? Because that's going to be an impossible task. And so we really work with our clients to help them build brain-based toolbox of like emotion regulation skills. And one of the things that we do best in that regard is neurofeedback and neurostimulation, because those neurotherapies can really start to regulate networks in the brain that may be negatively impacting a person's ability to actually get those butterflies in formation. So we spend a good amount of time focused on that. So this is just a slide. I'm not going to spend much time on this one, but it's really kind of looking at the focus of neurotherapy. The idea of sometimes we're working on increasing cortical excitation or arousal. Sometimes we're working on deactivating it, and that oftentimes depends on what we are seeing in the individual's EEG that might indicate that we want to do one or the other. And in a minute, I'll give you an example of that. And then we're oftentimes looking at producing or at enhancing stability so that we're being able, this is that idea of consistency that we talked about earlier, that a client or person can reduce the variability in the brain state so that they can stay in a particular state for a longer time. And I use an example of this. I have a client that has a lot of anxiety, and she's not in for peak performance, but she will perform more at peak when she's done with our training. and she has a ton of anxiety, and one of the places that she carries the anxiety is in her jaw, in her left jaw in particular. And so we've spent time just very slowly having her watch her own EEG, and you can see the jaw tension show up in the EEG. You know, it looks like fast beta waves, but it's not. It's muscle tension or artifact. And we'll have her watch that, and then have her find a way to stop those that brain wave in that T3 sensor from looking that way. And so we tell her to relax her jaw. She drops her jaw open, and then the next step, it would be easy to just kind of stop there because, okay, good, we got rid of that. But the next step then is to have her close her eyes and feel the state that she is in that moment when she has seen her EEG clear out, and to feel that state, and then to open it up again. And then we'll have her gently, purposefully tighten her jaw just a little bit so she sees that happen, and then notice what that brain state feels like, what she feels like just in general. And we worked with her, did this twice with her, and then the third time we did it, I asked the tech, you know, how's it going? Nothing. He said there's no problem with the jaw tension anymore. And so this is a good idea of, so it's her learning how to be in a state that produces less tension in general, and then it doesn't show up in the jaw. And then also training the ability to be flexible, right, to transition from one state to another, that sort of thing. So how do we do this? So we do it in a couple of ways. First is the assessment piece. So we do a quantitative EEG, right? That's a brain mapping. We also do an event-related potential. So the EEG, the QEEG, allows us to record and look at and analyze brainwave in kind of a passive state. And then the event-related potential allows us to analyze it in an active state. And so it gives us a plethora of data to just be able to get a good sense of what's going on in the brain. And then we really strongly encourage genetic testing. Again, that idea that, like, if there is something that is a genetic mutation that's causing anxiety, there's nothing that we're going to do about that piece of it with brain training. We can't address it that way, and that individual, we would want them to consider a nutritional way of addressing that, like through supplements, that sort of thing. This slide just lists the variety of things that we do when we're working with people. This is with clients in general, but certainly for people who are doing peak performance. So we might do neurostimulation. It's pretty common for us in the clinic to do 5, 6, 7 sessions of neurostimulation just at the beginning of training, just to kind of prime the brain to be ready for neurofeedback. But sometimes it also might be to help with self-regulation, those sorts of things. And then we do neurofeedback, and this is kind of the primary thing that we would do with somebody when we're working on peak performance. And so most often, as Guy said earlier, we're working on, we do 19-channel neurofeedback, and so we're working on regulating a particular network, one that we have seen in the image that Guy showed you of all the brain networks, the brain optimization index. We've chosen a network there that is particularly dysregulated, and we're working on that. What the end result of that is and how that might correlate with peak performance is it can enhance focus, it can help with impulse control, sustained attention, cognitive flexibility, those things. We also do heart rate variability and biofeedback to work on helping clients regulate their autonomic nervous system. We have in recent times really kind of incorporated this into every session that we do. We want to keep an eye on what's going on their autonomic nervous system, and that we just hook them up so that we can read their metrics. And then that allows us in any moment of training to be able to stop and have them work on doing some regulation of that autonomic nervous system if it looks like it would be useful. We do audiovisual entrainment. Most often this is an at-home intervention that we do. I wouldn't say intervention, it's an at-home device that we use. We refer to it as the toothbrush for the brain in the clinic. It's something that is used daily to help with focus. It works really well to help people manage sleep, not only insomnia, but quality sleep, which is oftentimes the bigger issue than insomnia. Can help with self-regulation as well. We have audiovisual entrainment units in schools where they use them in their resource rooms to help kids who are experiencing dysregulation. They'll take them out of the class, put an audiovisual entrainment device on them, run a protocol, kids calm down, and they're back in class again. To me, that's a prime example of peak performance training happening, right? That child is being given opportunity to enhance and perform at their full potential. And then we do photobiomodulation as well for self-regulation, can help with that. It can also, if somebody's got inflammation in the brain or in some part of the body, it can be very helpful with that. We spend time doing sleep training. We talk a lot with our clients about sleep. Again, the AVE is a good device for that, but we also oftentimes will recommend a sleep supplement and talk a lot about sleep hygiene, those sorts of things. And then nutritional health as well. Again, we're always talking with people about eating first of all, and then eating a healthy diet, and nutritional supplements when they are indicated. And then the idea of encouraging our clients to do exercise, and whatever that means for them. Exercise looks different for for each of us uniquely. And so this is this is like the toolbox that we bring to clients, and this is what we can do for them as we're working on helping them reach that peak performance goal. So the last thing I'm going to do is I want to share this case study with you, just to give you a sense of sort of how we might work with somebody. So this particular person, she is a corporate exec. She's well known nationally in the financial wealth sector, and she came to us with a stated goal of literally of peak performance. That's what she had on her intake form. And so we talked a little bit more about what that actually means, and what she really wanted to do was improve her cognitive functioning, and in particular her short-term memory and her decision making. And so those were the goals that we were working on. When we did the brain mapping on her, there were some results that came up that really started to influence the direction that we went with training. So I'm just going to point a couple of things out here. You can see over here on the screen, this is an example of a map we might get from doing a brain mapping. This is giving us some indication about the amount of brainwave in the individual's brain in each of these, that we call these 1 Hertz bins. If you look down here, you see the legend. What this is telling us that is this brain is compared, so her data was compared against a database of neurotypical brains, and then this is what we're seeing is kind of the result of that. And so anybody, the gray here would be kind of neurotypical. Anything that's falling into the cooler colors is standard deviations below the norm. This one goes to 3 standard deviations. Anything in the warmer colors is standard deviations above the norm. And I have circled here the 12 through 15 hertz frequency bands on her maps. And what we see here, this is the low beta range, and what we see in her is a significant deficit in low beta. And low beta in the research has been linked with brain synchronization, which then synchronization plays a role in information processing throughout the brain. And that has a pretty significant impact on performance, that's like brain performance. Hers was very low, and so we spent our initial sessions looking at addressing this. We did, I think on the next screen, I think it was 9 sessions that we did of neurostimulation at a low beta frequency, trying to begin to kind of get the brain to start producing kind of coming on board with that idea of producing the low beta waves or more of them. There was also in her findings, so we're able to kind of look at specific regions. And remember, Guy was talking about the networks, and he said I would talk about something more specific. This particular analysis allows us to get very specific down to like a particular Brodmann area. One of the things that showed up for her is some significant dysregulation in an area of the brain. So if we're talking about the structure of the brain, it's the dorsal prefrontal or dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex. But when we narrow it down more, what we're really looking at is or make it bigger, we're looking at the default mode network here. This area, this particular area, it's Brodmann area 9, is oftentimes associated with memory functions, the ability to sustain attention, and executive functioning. These are the things that she came in talking about. Executive function is organizing, planning, decision making, prioritizing, those sorts of things. And so she's like this prime example of, she came in, said this is what's causing, this is what I'm feeling like I'm having trouble with, and her EEG said, yep, looks like you might be having trouble with that, right? And so we did she's still training with us right now. She's about 30 sessions in. We did 9 neurostim sessions, and then we moved over to neurofeedback and have worked on a couple of networks with her. We started with the executive function network, looked at the map to see which ones were most dysregulated, and the executive function definitely was. And then we've moved on now to training the memory network. And along the road, not very long, I think it's been probably, I would guess 2 or 3 weeks now that she got on board and took an audiovisual entrainment device home because she was having difficulty with sleep. She was feeling like she wasn't sleeping well, and so we're getting her to use that for sleep. My hope is that we can get her to use it during the day as well, because I think it could be really useful for her in terms of just the focus and those sorts of things that can be a challenge for her. The outcomes that we've seen so far, so from an objective standpoint, we have seen she had a very low amplitude EEG when she came in. That amplitude has increased, and we know that can be correlated with better synchronization, and so that seems like a good outcome to have. And then both of her networks have been regulating well. When we train somebody, we have training thresholds, and we work on trying to get those thresholds harder and harder and harder, right? And so the threshold is just like how many standard deviations above the norm is the dysregulation in this network, and then we work hard to kind of knock down that dysregulation. And we've been successful, certainly with the executive function, and there's been some change in the memory network, more to do, but that's what we like to do. And then from a subjective standpoint, what she has reported is that she feels more calm and less reactive. And what I know about more calm and less reactive, it means that she's going to have better ability to make decisions, which indeed she tells us she does. She feels like she is better able to make decisions promptly now without having to kind of perseverate on it too long. She feels less intensity and overwhelm with anxiety when it shows up. Again, this is her brain's capacity, right, to be able to start to manage that some. And then most recently, she has said that she is starting to notice some short-term memory improvements, and can give some examples around that in terms of like somebody telling her something and she actually remembers that it was told to them, or told to her, that sort of thing. So for us, she is already a success in terms of enhancing her performance. She would say the same to you, that she feels like she is performing better than she was when she came in, and is closer to that goal that she had when she came in as well.
So I'll just share a couple of quick case studies. So one of my favorites is a peak performance person who came in explicitly for peak performance. We did kind of our standard testing, so we did neurocognitive testing, and we did QEEG, and basically the guy scored above average on everything, right? So he scored as high as you could on all of the tests that we did. And I remember looking at his data, looking at his report, and just thinking, what are we going to do for this person? I mean, like, he's maxed out. And this is a double advanced degree, so a doctor and an engineer at the peak of his profession, doing very well. And so even there, it's kind of like, what's the problem? And his stated problem was, I feel like I've slipped a little, and I'd like to get back that little bit that I've lost. And I thought, well, okay. I mean, we'll just do what we do. We optimize brains, we optimize nervous systems. So that's what we did. And so we started the training, did the training. All of that went well. It's a fascinating story, just how he went through it. But and every time we're doing an intake, every time, how are things going? What's changing? How are things going? What's changing? And he kept trying to find change in again, just these small little, like his ability, like how fast could he type, how many words per minute, how many errors did he make when he was typing at his highest rate. So he was measuring all of these things, looking for his improvement in performance, and he was seeing some minor changes there. But again, when you're kind of at the elite level, it's hard to get measurably better. So one day he comes in and he's just beaming, and he said, I got to tell you what happened. He said, I was at a party, and I had an opportunity to tell a joke, so I told a joke. And he said, I've wanted to do this my whole life, but I've never been able to. I can never remember the punchline. I can't get my timing right. I get awkward. Like, I'll tell one poor joke, and then people just kind of stop listening and kind of move away from me. He said, but I didn't even think about it. There was just a group of people, and I told a joke, and they laughed, and then I told another joke, and they laughed. And he said, it's 30 minutes. I just had everybody's rapt attention for 30 minutes. He said, it was absolutely the high point of my life. It's something, like, and to know this guy, and I do know him well, is he's got a bookcase full of books all about that. And yet, despite all of that effort going into it, he was unable to do it. But that's where we found his peak performance came out. It was actually in his social self. So much of his social anxiety, even though it was not in a single health form, it wasn't a thing we were tracking, but just in optimizing the functioning of his nervous system, he was able to show up in social situations and not have that anxiety that just hung him up. His ex-wife had commented, like, you're the husband I wanted, what happened? His current partner could not believe who he became in the relationship. He'd been running a meeting, for decades. He'd been running a monthly meeting. And every month, even though it was the same, the procedure was the same, when it was coming up, he'd get anxious, he'd have his notes, he would stumble through his notes. And then the meeting came around where he never even took out his notes. He just did the process that he's been doing for decades, no stumbling, just smooth through it. And then realized, like, he had just done that, just ad-libbed it. So this was a major change for him in this sector of his life where, again, it was totally unanticipated. But this, to me, this is the part I get excited about. I mean, I get excited about all of the gains our clients make, but it's these extra ones that happen when people's sense of self improves, when their self-efficacy improves, even though maybe they were in for their ADHD. So he's one of my favorite kind of peak performance people. So then I've got another one, kind of parallels Fran. So kind of a corporate CEO, mid-sized company, 3,000 employees, a lot of pressure. High-performing person, marathons, great shape, all of it, all of the things you could want, checks all the boxes. So he's in, again, it had been maybe mentioned to him that things were slipping a little bit, maybe he could improve. So he'd come in to say, like, is there really anything that you can do? He was convinced there wasn't. So in our first day, I'm just looking at some of his metrics, and I'm starting to ask him questions because some of his autonomic nervous system is just terrible. And again, I totally appreciate this type of person, because the first thing he does is he's got his phone out and he's showing me all of his scans, right? All of the executive physicals that he's been through, and he's just like, perfect. Everything is perfect. Like, you can't be telling me this guy. Everything is perfect. My blood test is perfect. My MRI, full body MRI, everything. There's not a problem. And I'm like, your autonomic nervous system. So as we were talking, and this was not like a part of a health intake report. It was really just a side comment in a bit of a social conversation we were having. And he just mentioned that, he was well known for his ability to just fall asleep. So just, sitting around with friends, a little lull in the conversation, poof, fall asleep. And I thought, that's not a sign of optimal health, right? Like people that are really healthy don't just fall asleep. And sure enough, we saw it in training where he couldn't go 30 seconds without falling asleep if there wasn't a stimulus, if he wasn't given something to do. So what we found was that basically his autonomic nervous system, which should shift gears very smoothly. It should be a very smooth transmission, and you should be able to optimize in any state, whatever the environment is calling for. But he really only had 2 gears, like fully on and off. But anything in between, any place he had to calibrate, he couldn't do it. So we really focused more on biofeedback than neurofeedback to kind of give back to his autonomic nervous system its innate intelligence for, again, that kind of a homeostasis, dynamic process of being able to bring him into a state and modulate that state. So part of our conversation is like, well, he wanted to know, what's this good for? Like, okay, guy, like, sure, maybe this is happening, okay, but what's it good for? How does it matter outside of this room? And so what we talked about, the place that I took was relationships, right? I said, chances are that if you're just having a conversation with your wife, or if you're just, kind of having a conversation with the kids, just goofing off with the kids, that's not enough stimulus, and you just drop out. It's like, yeah, actually, that's true. Often having a conversation at the end of the day with my wife, just fall asleep. So unless things are really stimulating, there's really not engagement. I said, well, how would that be if instead of having to move through things quickly and keep going, you were actually able to spend time, settle, and kind of go into the depth of the relationship? And what was interesting was just the blank look on his face. Like, what are you talking about? But as we went through the training, this is what started to emerge, was that he found that actually he had this growing ability that he had lost somewhere along the line to actually be present and just be with another person. And so for him, like, that's a part that came back to him that he had lost, was a whole aspect of life that was really about being in relationship and not about just keeping going, getting things done. What's the next thing on the list? Which he was very good at, but this other part, his nervous system, had just lost the ability to do it. So, many examples, but these are 2 of my favorites, just because what the person got out of it wasn't even on their radar when they came in. They didn't, it's that you don't know what you don't know. They didn't know that this was possible for them by something like brain training.
Okay, so just a couple more slides and we're done for the evening. This is just a slide that tells you about our process for helping you. And so again, we start out doing an assessment that is pretty thorough so that we can get a full picture for ourselves, but also for you, of how your whole system is functioning. Certainly you're including your brain, but the rest of your system as well. Then we typically do a report of findings where once we've analyzed all the data from the brain mappings, we meet with you and we talk with you about what the findings are, what our recommendations, what might be, and we have some conversation around that. And then we engage in the training process. Training on average for neurotherapy, so neurofeedback and neurostimulation, is about 40 sessions total. We ask clients to come in to do training at least twice a week. There needs to be some repetition to help with that, the creation of the new neural networks, and so it's good to have at least twice a week. We have some people who come in and do intensives, and that's fine, but we kind of ask for, at least at the beginning of training, a minimum of twice a week. And we have clients who certainly train longer than the 40 sessions. We actually have a subset of clients. We have what we call an alumni club, where that's for clients who have gone through a full set of training and now just sort of want to keep going in some capacity, but not at the same intensity level. And so they come in a couple times a month to do training.